Hello, everyone. I'm Father Alexander Har, and this is A Bridge Between, the podcast where we bridge the distance between our physical friendships. We bridge the distance in our knowledge of the gospel. And today we're actually having a special bridge because I've invited a guest on here while Father Dave is on vacation in California, probably enjoying a margarita as we speak. So be jealous, but still watch the podcast. And I'm here with Father Andrew Hayes, who's the rector of St. Clement's Episcopal Church, which is the first Episcopal church I ever attended. And he's also my sending rector. And even though I have no reason whatsoever to still suck up to him, I've still brought him on for this episode.
Well, thank you for that introduction, and thanks for inviting me.
It's my pleasure. So you're located in Tampa, right?
Yes, yep.
And
hidden away in North Tampa.
Right. And how long have you served as the rector of St. Clement's? 18
years.
Wow.
I arrived in November the 23rd, 2006.
Now you have a very unique accent I haven't heard before.
Oh, it's an official, real Tampa accent. I was born in Tampa in 2013.
No, you were not.
That's when I became a naturalized citizen. But,
yes.
So I have two birth dates, really.
So you're a born-again American?
I guess, yes.
Oh.
Yeah.
But obviously you're from the UK.
Yes, the northwest. Nearest big city would be Manchester.
Ah, okay. And guitars in the background? I mean, because you're a musician, and that's wonderful. Yeah.
Yep, all left-handed guitars. If any left-handed guitarists out there are pining for a left-handed guitar, I may be able to let one go at a reasonable price.
Well, or they're just anti-theft guitars because nobody's left-handed. Okay. Now, I've asked you to come on and discuss this week's reading. So for those of you who are paying attention, we have the June 23rd, would be the Sunday that we're talking about. And you're actually doing track 2. So
yes.
For those of you who are watching the lectionary, there's track 1, there's track 2. In my parish at St. John the Divine, we've been using track 1 and, going through Samuel and Saul and that wonderful story. And you're going through Job, or as some lectors will pronounce it, Job.
Yes, I think I might have made that mistake first time. And probably still would go bright red thinking about it. So let's move on.
Exactly. We'll be kind. So what is there a specific kind of thread or specific text that you wanted to talk about today to kind of help either our preachers or those who are watching the lectionary this week as they get ready for masses, just kind of tug on to?
Yeah, well, I do like the link between the Job reading and the gospel, which is to do with Jesus calming the waters. They're in the boat and the disciples are going crazy, scared to death. Job is kind of been fulminating for ages. We're on chapter 38, so he's had best part of 37 chapters to complain to God, and now God turns up. And Job wants an answer. Why has all this happened to me? And I haven't done anything wrong.
Right.
And I think we've all been there. It's part of the human condition.
Well, there's I wish I remembered the author as a Jewish author that says the name of the book is when bad things happen to good people.
Yeah.
Rushner, I believe, is one of those. It's one of those. It's a great book, and for me, I think when we're counseling people in examples of pastoral care or issues of death and dying and illness, and that moment of asking, why is this happening to me? Because this is actually something personal and distinctive in my situation. It's not something that's happening to somebody else. We do engage God in that way. And I love that you state that there's kind of like all these chapters of Job complaining. Because one of the things that I state when I talk to people in these situations and I preach about it is God doesn't tell anybody to shut up. He doesn't tell them to stop talking, because if we're meant to have a relationship with God, then it is a consistent and constant dialogue. God doesn't tell us to be quiet. He knows that we need to say these things. And I find that people are hesitant to complain to God, at least some of the people that I meet. What's your experience?
Well, it's the same thing. There's it's kind of a double whammy, really. People feel that suffering in silence is somehow godly.
Mhm.
And so because they're suffering in silence, they think there's a kind of spiritual element to it. Yet they cannot get away from the agonizing questions that all begin with why.
Yeah.
But then they think, well, if I ask the question why, does that mean I'm doubting? Does that mean my faith is less than I think it should be? But the truth is, it's a really healthy question that God wants us to ask, because faith seeks understanding.
Hmm.
And if we don't ask the questions, we're actually limiting the experience of what's going on. We're kind of pushing it away as if it doesn't really hit us in a real way. We kind of put a wall between what's happened and how we feel we want to understand it, because God doesn't want us to think about it. We just need to move on. Nothing to see here. Let's just move on, get on with the next thing in our lives. And that will cause real problems further on.
Well, I think one of the ways that I have understood it is that the opposite of faith is not doubt, it is fear.
Yeah.
Faith is putting our trust in God. Faith is acknowledging where we need to put our trust. Doubt is, well, how would you describe doubt? I mean, to me, doubt is when we're just unsure of kind of what direction we're walking, of what direction we're going, but we're continuing to ask the questions and to seek.
Yes. Yeah. Doubting Thomas. He said, I've known you for 3 years, maybe. You tell me this Jesus guy's around. I'm not going to believe it until I see it. And Jesus didn't rebuke him for that. He says, don't doubt, but believe. And his first words were, my Lord and my God. It was like,
Right.
And we're not even told whether he actually did do what he said he needed to
Correct.
do to believe.
Correct. So I would say that the faith and fear dynamic leads us into the gospel, I think, pretty well. Now, I'm not going to say I've caught flack, but I haven't been struck by lightning yet when I say the following thing. But if it happens live on the podcast, we'll know it's supposed to happen then. Which is when Jesus asks some of these questions that he does in Scripture, they just seem so self-evident. Almost to the point of like, was that question really necessary? When he sees the disciples, why are you so afraid? It's kind of like, do you see what's happening around us? Of course we're afraid. Why are you asking us what we're afraid? And I have a theory behind it. I think it's important to name our fears. And when I've worked with people who have been afraid, when I myself have suffered through fear and anxiety, one of the things I've had to do is just name what I'm afraid of, because sometimes it's kind of like when you're having a nightmare and you feel just kind of this black image or a black cloud of something that you're afraid of happening in your dream or your nightmare. But when it comes into focus and you see what it actually is, you can acknowledge what that fear is all about. And I think for many of us, we may in our lives just kind of had this generalized fear that we don't know how to identify. But when we name it, then we can maybe get control of it.
Yeah, it's making something concrete, which is just maybe in your head.
Mm-hmm.
It's like doing these affirmations that some parts of the world sort of say, if you say something often enough, it becomes real. Well, you can actually change your own attitude towards things by saying them out loud, or writing them down, and making them concrete. When it comes to doubts and things of faith, saying them out loud, I'm scared. Just even if it's only to yourself, you're admitting something which you otherwise may try to push to one side. And like I say, the psychic problems that can create further down the line. We've all heard of people who were ardent Christians, who really believed in the Lord, and then something happens and they snap. I can't believe in a God who would do this to me.
Right.
So you have to work out who is it they actually believed in the first place. So when Jesus asks these dumb questions, maybe, and, I don't see any, although that little piece of curtain does look like it has been burned by lightning previously, but it must have missed you.
Yeah.
Jesus is making us make the question. It may sound stupid, and we do this pastorally as well. We feed back what we believe we've heard, and when it comes, sometimes you see a surprise on the person's face because one, they've been listened to, because they understand they've been heard, and two, it's like, did I really say that? And you also see this kind of release and relief as well in a person.
I think that's so true, because I think a lot about the changes in life that we go through. So, for example, if a couple who's about to get married, or welcoming a first child, or, for those clergy who are going through a transition, I went through a transition recently, and I had a lot of anxiety about it. And I had to sit down and talk with a few people and say, okay, what exactly am I anxious about? Well, I had to name it. I'm anxious about getting to know a new group of people. Are they going to like me? I mean, I know I'm adorable, but, are they going to like me? And then second of all, I had to name the grief that I was experiencing and will continue to experience for a while of leaving another community. Naming it has helped me to work through it. And I think one of the things that you said is people need to be interacting with other people so that we can name it to each other. I'm trying to think about areas where we have fear. Like, I'm scared of spiders. That's probably because, they have fallen on me and walked through webs and things like that. It's not an irrational fear. It's a real fear, like being afraid of heights or something else. But I think what Jesus gets to the heart of when he's asking the disciples, what are you afraid of, is why do you also have so little faith? Those are two questions that I think appear to be linked, but are actually separate. You can kind of link them or unlink them as you need to, because if I ask you, what are you afraid of? And then you tell me, and then I ask you, well, why do you have so little faith? It's like, well, if, the faith and the fear are separate things, if I'm having more faith, maybe I'll feel less fear, or I don't know. I mean, like, why do you think those two questions are together in the gospel?
I think part of it is the walk of faith is undetermined to us. We put our foot in front of each other, and our lives are such that we don't know what our existence is in the next minute, in the next 30 minutes, the next evening.
Yeah.
Things can change. But we live, we plan life as if we are in some kind of control. And when that control is removed from us, that's where the fear comes from. But this is where faith should come in. So with Job, he's going to get a real rollicking off God now. Were you around when I created everything? No. Well, shut up then. There are things beyond you that you're never going to understand.
Yeah.
In terms of the disciples being in the boat, they've seen lightning before. They've seen the wind roar. It's part of their job description, really, as fishermen. They understood what was going on. But they were with somebody who seemed to be above and beyond all this, and yet it's still happening to them. So maybe their fear came out because they had faith in Jesus, but it wasn't working out quite as they thought it should do. So in a way, Jesus, if you weren't here, this would not be happening. Or at least we wouldn't be reacting in the same way, because it'd be, hey, it's just another day in the fishing boat.
Right. And
we can live our lives like that.
Right. And I think there's another element to this, because they'll ask the question, don't you care that we're about to drown? Don't you care we're about to die? That's a strong question that people will ask God. Don't you care?
Yeah.
And I think fundamentally that's one of the questions we will ask in our faith is, does God care about us, and will God do something about it? And pastorally, that's very hard for us to address, because God does not answer every prayer, in the way that we imagine it's going to be or should be answered.
Yeah.
There's a book that I'm reading right now called Praying Like Monks, Living Like Fools, where the author talks about having one friend who survives this, tragic injury, with his heart, and another friend who, faces paralysis with something that happened to him. And it's kind of, where's the rhyme and reason in relationship to what God will and won't do?
Mm.
And so when the disciples are asking, like, don't you care? Like, Jesus is saying, if I'm with you, don't you think that I'm going to take care of you in the way that you need? So it's hard. It's hard.
I'm trying to remember the name of that young girl who became paralyzed after a swimming accident.
Mm-hmm.
She dived and banged her head. I've forgotten her
Yeah.
name. And out of that absolute tragedy became something good.
Mm-hmm.
But I wouldn't want to say that God caused the tragedy for something to
Right.
come out good. And that's another problem with some of these verses, that, when we see, it's all to do with our faith attitude, that we understand that all things come to the good for those who believe. There's the thing, for those who believe. It doesn't mean to say that because you believe nothing tragic's ever going to happen into your life, but it's that even if and when things happen which are really awful, God can and will use them. But you have to be more than a capitalist. You have to be willing to see God moving you forward in that faith. And that's really, really hard.
Well, I think the best analogy is you have to be willing to be in the boat.
Ooh,
Yeah.
is that almost corny?
Yeah, it's almost corny, but it's there.
It
I mean, I
is.
think that's the thing that when I preached on this several years ago, I said, the disciples were afraid; they thought they were going to die, but they also remembered that Jesus was in the boat, like he wasn't going to perish, and he wasn't going to let them perish. So all of these things that we're going to encounter, if we approach them with faith, it doesn't mean that they're going to get fixed, but it does mean that they will be transformed along the way, that will be transformed along the way. And what frightens me, what worries me so much about the society in which we're living, is that there's so many people who are dealing with tragedy who have no community, right? They have no faith. They have no faith family or even a biological family to help them. We're in a tremendous age of loneliness.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so maybe something to preach about this Sunday would be to ask the question, okay, are you inviting other people into the boat with you to withstand the storm? Are you reaching out and going to other people where their storm is and bringing Jesus to them? Those are kind of the outreach questions that I like to ask.
There's also the questions to do with in what sense do you understand community? Everything's sort of fracturing. So there's just small in groups of like-minded people, some, with amazing things that they do. But as a church, we should be able to nurture people in a much deeper way and a fuller way. A wider gamut of experience. But I think one of the problems we have as the church is the kind of notion of confidentiality within congregations. That we say that we admit our faults during every Eucharist. I've done things wrong.
Yeah.
I wonder how actually we take that seriously. How much we take that seriously. And then when we receive the absolution, I wonder how much we take that seriously. And then when we're inviting people who are broken, because we see ourselves as equally broken but redeemed, then we have to allow people, but we need to earn their trust. And that in this day and age is quite hard.
Well, I think we need to be, and I hate to use a church buzzword, that is kind of, in my opinion, very cliche, but we need to have a sense of authenticity. We need
Oh,
to be real.
yes.
We need to be real with people, and that we are sinners as well. But, I'm thinking about this, and this will kind of be the last one, our last segment here, is I've been thinking a lot about the prayers of the people, during the context of the service. And you mentioned, the confidentiality. You mentioned that we don't always share kind of what's happening with one another in our congregations. But in my parish right now, one of the things that I've been trying to work through is kind of tightening up the prayers of the people, so that maybe people who've been there for a long time, we kind of ask them, "Hey, how are you? Do you still need the same type of prayer? Do we need to pray for you in a different way?" And so, 4 times a year, we kind of reset the prayer list, tell everybody, "Okay, so resubmit your name," so that we kind of start fresh. But for some people, that can be very traumatic,
Mm.
because they feel like they're no longer being prayed for, when you're trying to tell them, no, just some people don't even remember they're on the prayer list. And you kind of want to, but it reminds me that in the context of our services, either an office or a Eucharist, that we're actually sharing the needs of the people. And sometimes when you have that name that you say out loud in the context of the service, and they're kind of like looking around like, I didn't know they were sick, that's a good opportunity to, maybe not all at once, but to check on them. That's the old saying, there's so many people who are struggling with things that we know nothing about. And so tightening up that community by praying for one another, I think, is very important. And a profound silence followed as he disagreed. No.
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 I'm always taken aback with. I think the largest part of any intercession list should be the thanksgiving, and we find out when people are expecting, when they need a job, when they're traveling, when they're in need of all sorts of things. But we never find out. We never get the follow up. How was the baby? How's the mother? How's the new family life? How did the travel go? Did they have any snafus or anything like all these kind of things? So everything should automatically be moved by the people who who made the request in the first place, to the Thanksgiving. So that should be a huge segment of our intercessions. But somehow that kind of gets forgotten, at least in my experience.
Yeah, I think it does, and I agree that the Thanksgiving part is harder for us, because maybe we're not sure what to give Thanksgiving for. Sometimes we talked about the birth of a child or a new job, or weddings and anniversaries and birthdays. Those are always good, but sometimes we don't know what to give thanks for. So I think it's teaching that it's okay to express gratitude is very important
in all things.
In all things, and the next sign perhaps for the that the baby is well is that, and he or she's being baptized in a month or so. So that's kind of the way we follow up. So, as we kind of come back all the way to the beginning, which is what I like to do as we get towards the end, there's a sense of humility that we're being asked to have in God's presence, be it in the Old Testament or in the New Testament, about, okay, you've asked me this question, now I'm going to give you an answer. In this case, Job asking the question, God giving the answer. In the New Testament, of course, it's Jesus giving the question and the disciples giving the answer. That there has to be a sense of humility on our part, and a willingness to let go of that sense of control. But the reminder is that the relationship hasn't stopped. The relationship hasn't ended simply because there's turmoil and conflict, in that relationship between us and God.
I like Job's reply when he gets kind of slapped across the side of the head by God.
Mm-hmm.
I placed my finger upon my lips because I spoke about things I did not know. And that should apply to clergy as well. In our attempts to be helpful, sometimes the best thing we can do is be quiet and say, I don't know, but I'm with you.
And I think
I am alongside you.
And those words are very powerful when you admit you don't have the answer. When I admit that I do not have the answer, but I'm going to sit here with you and we're going to not know together.
Mm-hmm.
That, to me, is faith.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, Father, I've got to thank you. The time has flown by for this episode, so I'm thankful that you were able to join us today. And people take vacations, so you might get asked again. It'd be a wonderful time to have you on again. Anything you want to share about what's happening at St. Clement's in the near future that you want to promote?
There is off the top of my head. We've got lots going on. We just had another bilingual service with St. Francis, which was great.
Hmm.
Trying to do those for the third Sunday of every month.
Nice.
But I'm away in July, so there won't be one this in July.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's one of the things that's happening there. You've partnered with St. Francis Episcopal Church, which is a Hispanic church, and they're a lively bunch. And I know they have a lot of fun, and I know that they really appreciate the relationship they have with St. Clement's. So
They have really made me look at my English reserve in a new way.
yes,
It's
yes,
good fun.
good, good. Well, everyone who's watching and listening online, don't forget you can catch us on YouTube. Wednesdays after 10 in the morning is when it usually posts, but we're also on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and pretty much anywhere you can get a podcast here. So like, subscribe, and don't forget to leave a comment, and we'll catch everybody in the next one. Thanks.